My sister Callista stood up at my 7-year-old daughter's funeral, clinked her champagne glass against the microphone, and announced her engagement while my baby girl's casket sat 10 feet away. The sound of that glass hitting the metal made everyone in the funeral home turn their heads. She was wearing the black Versace dress she'd bought for her promotion celebration last year, the one that cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. Her perfectly manicured fingers wrapped around that champagne flute like she was at a cocktail party, not standing next to my daughter's body. "I know this is a difficult day," she said, her voice carrying that fake sweetness she used with her pharmaceutical clients. "But Preston and I wanted to share something that might bring a little light to this darkness. We've set our wedding date for June 15th. My mother actually gasped with delight. My own mother, Gloria, who had held Emma's hand through countless hospital visits, clasped her hands together like Callista had just announced the second coming. "Finally, some good news in this family," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. My Uncle John, the man who never missed an opportunity to share his wisdom about life, started clapping, actually clapping, at my daughter's funeral. "Life goes on," Uncle John declared, his booming voice filling the room. "Emma would want us to celebrate life, not mourn death." Other relatives joined in, creating this surreal scene of applause next to my child's casket. Emma's favorite stuffed rabbit, Mr. Hoppy, sat propped against the flowers, his button eyes seeming to stare at the spectacle in disbelief. I stood there frozen, my hands gripping the pew in front of me so hard my knuckles went white. This couldn't be real. My baby girl had been gone for only 4 days. 4 days since I'd found her in her princess bed, her skin cold, her lips blue, her little hand still clutching the paintbrush she'd been using the night before. And here was my sister, my own blood, turning Emma's funeral into her personal engagement announcement party. But then something happened that changed everything. My 8-year-old nephew, Brody, who'd been standing quietly beside his father, my brother Devin, walked slowly toward Callista. He was wearing the little black suit we'd bought him yesterday, the one he'd cried about because he said Emma would hate seeing him so fancy. His small hand reached up and tugged on Callista's expensive dress. "Aunt Callista," Brody said, his voice clear and innocent in the sudden quiet, "should I tell everyone what you did to Cousin Emma's medicine?" The champagne glass slipped from Callista's hand, shattering on the funeral home's marble floor. The sound echoed through the room like a gunshot. Her face went from that fake smile to sheet white in less than a second. Preston, her fiancé, stepped back from her like she'd suddenly caught fire. "What are you talking about, sweetie?" Callista's voice cracked, but she tried to force that smile back onto her face. Her hand reached for Brody's shoulder, but he stepped away. "The white pills," Brody continued, unaware he was about to destroy everything. "You switched them in Emma's brown bottle. You said it was a game, and I couldn't tell anyone or I'd get in big trouble. My name is Veronica, and I'm 34 years old. Until 4 days ago, I was a single mother to the most beautiful, creative, brave little girl who ever lived. Emma had been my whole world since the day she was born. She came into this life fighting 2 weeks early during a snowstorm that knocked out power to half the city. The nurses said she was impatient to start living, and they were right. Even with her illness, even with all the pain she endured, Emma attacked life with a joy that made everyone around her smile. My sister Callista is 5 years younger than me. Growing up, I protected her from bullies, helped her with homework, held her when her first boyfriend broke her heart. When she got her job in pharmaceutical sales 3 years ago, she celebrated at my house, spinning Emma around the kitchen while they both laughed. She'd been the one who used her connections to get Emma into the clinical trial that had been working miracles, or so I thought. Standing in that funeral home, watching my sister's mask finally crack, watching the truth spill out through an 8-year-old boy's innocent words, I realized that sometimes the people we trust most are the ones capable of the greatest betrayal. 3 weeks before Emma died, she painted her best butterfly ever. She'd been working on it for hours at our kitchen table, her tongue poking out slightly in concentration, the way it always did when she focused hard. The butterfly's wings were brilliant orange and black, a monarch with intricate patterns that seemed impossible for a 7-year-old to create. But Emma wasn't just any 7-year-old. Despite fighting juvenile dermatomyositis for 2 years, she had the spirit of a warrior and the soul of an artist. "Mommy, this one's going to be in a museum someday," she announced, holding up the painting. The afternoon sun streaming through our window made the still wet paint shimmer. "When I'm a famous artist, people will say this is where it all started." I kissed the top of her head, breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo. "It's perfect, baby. Just like you." That same evening, Callista arrived with Emma's monthly medication refills. She'd been handling all of Emma's prescriptions for the past 6 months, ever since she'd gotten Emma into the revolutionary clinical trial at Nexus Pharmaceuticals. It was a new immunosuppressant that specifically targeted the inflammation causing Emma's muscle weakness without destroying her entire immune system. The results had been remarkable. Emma could hold her paintbrush steady for the first time in a year. She could run short distances without collapsing. She could hug me tight enough that I could actually feel it. "How's my favorite artist?" Callista asked, breezing into our house with her Louis Vuitton bag and perfectly styled blonde hair. She always looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine, even after a long day of sales calls. "Aunt Callie!" Emma jumped up, something she couldn't have done 2 months ago. "Look at my butterfly." Callista examined the painting with exaggerated interest. "This is absolutely stunning, Emma Bear. You're getting better every day, aren't you?" She glanced at me over Emma's head. "The medication is really working." "Dr. Hendricks says she's their star patient," I told her, organizing the prescription bottles she'd brought. "They want to feature her in the medical journals when the trial concludes. Can you imagine? My baby, helping other kids with the same condition." Callista's smile tightened just slightly. "That's wonderful. Really wonderful." She pulled out Emma's brown prescription bottle, the one for the trial medication. "This one's especially important. Every pill, every day, exactly as prescribed." "I know the drill," I said, laughing. "You've trained us well." Our family dynamic had always been complicated but loving. Our mother, Gloria, lived 20 minutes away and came over every Tuesday to watch Emma while I worked my shift at the hospital. I was a pediatric nurse, which meant I understood Emma's condition better than most parents would, but it also meant I knew exactly how serious it was. Our father had passed 5 years ago from a heart attack, leaving a small life insurance policy that I'd used to help cover Emma's medical expenses. My brother Devin was going through a messy divorce, which is why his son Brody had been spending more time at our house. Emma adored her older cousin. Despite the age gap, Brody was patient with her, playing dolls when she was too weak to do anything else, reading her stories when she was stuck in bed. He'd been there the day Callista brought the medications, playing with Emma in her room while Callista and I talked in the kitchen about wedding plans. "Preston's family wants the reception at their country club?" Callista had said, scrolling through her phone. "It's a bit pretentious, but his mother insists." "Must be nice to have those kinds of problems," I joked, not meanly. I was genuinely happy for her. Callista had worked hard to build her career, and Preston seemed to worship the ground she walked on. "You'll find someone," she said, squeezing my hand. "Once Emma's better, you'll have time to focus on yourself again." That conversation felt like a lifetime ago now. Emma had gone to bed that night excited about her art class the next day. She'd been getting stronger, more vibrant, more like the child she was before the disease tried to steal her childhood. The clinical trial was supposed to save her life. The medicine in that brown bottle was supposed to be her miracle. I trusted my sister completely. She'd used her pharmaceutical connections to get Emma into a trial with only 50 spots nationwide. She'd handled the insurance paperwork, the prescription refills, the communication with the drug company. She'd been our savior, our angel in designer heels. How could I have known that angels sometimes fall? Everything changed 48 hours after Callista's last visit. Emma woke up screaming at 3 in the morning, clutching her stomach. When I turned on her princess lamp, her face was gray and covered in sweat. She vomited blood onto her frozen bedsheets before I could even get her to the bathroom. I called 911 while holding her hair back, my hands shaking so hard I could barely dial. The paramedics arrived in 6 minutes that felt like 6 hours. They took one look at Emma and moved faster than I'd ever seen emergency responders move. "Possible organ failure," one of them said to his partner, thinking I couldn't hear. But I'm a pediatric nurse. I heard everything. I understood everything, and everything was falling apart. At the hospital, Dr. Hendricks met us in the emergency room. He'd been treating Emma for 2 years and had never looked panicked until that moment. "This isn't right," he said, examining her blood work. "Her liver enzymes are through the roof. Her kidney function is declining rapidly. This isn't consistent with juvenile dermatomyositis or even a reaction to the trial medication." "Then what is it?" I demanded, holding Emma's hand as she writhed in the hospital bed. "It looks like acute poisoning," he said quietly. "We're running toxicology screens now." Emma died 36 hours later. Her organs shut down one by one while I held her and sang, "You Are My Sunshine," the song I'd sung to her every night since she was born. Her last words were, "Mommy, I didn't finish my butterfly painting." Then she closed her eyes and never opened them again. The funeral preparations happened in a blur of grief. Callista took charge immediately, the way she always did in any crisis. She selected the funeral home, chose the flowers, coordinated with relatives flying in from across the country. I could barely function, moving through the days like a ghost myself. My mother kept bringing me food I couldn't eat. Devin handled the insurance paperwork. Everyone did everything while I just existed in a world where Emma didn't. "I've arranged for the Hampton Funeral Home," Callista told me 2 days after Emma died. "They have a beautiful children's section. Emma would like the clouds painted on the ceiling." I nodded numbly. Callista hugged me, and I smelled her expensive perfume, the same one she'd worn to Emma's last birthday party. "We'll get through this together," she whispered. "I promise." The day of the funeral arrived gray and drizzling, the kind of weather Emma used to call butterfly sleeping weather. The funeral home was packed with family, Emma's classmates, teachers, and nurses from the hospital where I worked. Little kids from her art class had drawn pictures that covered an entire wall, butterflies, hundreds of them, in every color a child could imagine. Uncle John had flown in from Phoenix, wearing the same black suit he'd worn to my father's funeral. He cornered me before the service started. "These things happen for a reason, Veronica. God has a plan." I wanted to scream at him that God's plan was garbage if it included killing 7-year-olds, but I just nodded and walked away. The service was beautiful and horrible simultaneously. Emma's art teacher spoke about her talent and determination. Her best friend, Susie, sang a song off-key, but with so much love that everyone cried. Devin read a poem while Brody stood beside him, looking lost and confused. Then it was time for final remembrances. That's when Callista stood up. She was supposed to talk about Emma. She was supposed to share a memory about her niece. Instead, she walked to the microphone, and I noticed she was holding a champagne glass. Where did she even get champagne at a funeral home? Preston stood beside her, looking uncomfortable in his expensive suit. "I know this is a difficult time," Callista began, and something in her tone made my skin crawl. It was the voice she used for presentations, not for grieving. "But Preston and I have something that might lift everyone's spirits." My mother perked up in her seat. Relatives leaned forward. Even Uncle John stopped checking his phone. "We've set our wedding date," Callista announced, raising her glass. "June 15th. We wanted our family to be the first to know, and since everyone is here together, we thought this was the right moment to share some joy." The silence lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then Uncle John started clapping. "Life goes on! Emma would want us celebrating!" Others joined in. My mother wiped away tears and said, "Finally, some good news in this family." Cousins started congratulating Preston. Aunt Ruth asked about wedding colors. And there sat Emma's casket, 10 feet away, covered in butterfly drawings and white roses, forgotten in the celebration of my sister's engagement. I stood there watching my family celebrate around my daughter's casket, and something inside me shattered. Not broke, not cracked, but shattered into pieces so small I knew I'd never be whole again. My hands gripped the wooden pew in front of me while relatives actually pulled out their phones to look at wedding venues Callista was suggesting. The funeral director stood in the corner, his mouth open in shock at the scene unfolding in his establishment. "The Peninsula Resort has beautiful June gardens," Aunt Ruth was saying. "My daughter had her reception there last summer." "Preston's mother wants the country club," Callista replied, laughing like we were at a Sunday brunch. But I'm thinking something more modern, I wanted to scream. I wanted to flip over the casket stands and throw the flower arrangements at the wall. I wanted to grab Callista by her perfect blonde hair and demand to know how she could do this. But my body wouldn't move. The grief had paralyzed me, turned me into a statue watching my daughter's funeral become my sister's impromptu engagement party. That's when I noticed Brody. He was standing apart from everyone, near Emma's photo display. His small hands were clenched at his sides, and he was staring at Callista with an expression I'd never seen on an 8-year-old's face. It was intense, troubled, like he was working through a complex math problem in his head. Brody had been staying with us the week Emma died. His parents' divorce had gotten ugly, with lawyers and custody evaluations, so Devin had asked if Brody could spend a few nights at our house to escape the tension. Emma had been thrilled. Even though she was younger, they played together beautifully. He'd taught her card games, and she'd taught him to paint. They'd spent hours in her room that last week, creating art projects and building pillow forts. Something about Brody's expression triggered a memory from 3 days before Emma got sick. He'd said something strange while we were making dinner. "Aunt Veronica, why did Aunt Callista tell me to keep secrets?" I'd been distracted, stirring pasta and trying to help Emma with her homework at the same time. "What secrets, honey?" "About Emma's medicine. She said it was a special game and I couldn't tell anyone." I dismissed it then, thinking Callista had probably just been trying to keep him from playing with Emma's pills. Kids were curious about everything, and Emma's medication routine was extensive. But now, watching Brody stare at Callista with that troubled expression, the conversation took on a different meaning. The celebration continued around me. Preston was showing Uncle John his Rolex, probably explaining how much it cost. My mother and Callista were scrolling through Pinterest, looking at wedding dresses. The funeral director had given up trying to maintain decorum and retreated to his office. And Emma's casket sat there, ignored, like she'd already been forgotten. Brody moved then. He walked slowly across the room, weaving between relatives who didn't notice him. His father was deep in conversation with a cousin about cryptocurrency. His grandmother was examining Callista's engagement ring. Nobody saw the little boy in the too big suit making his way toward my sister. I watched him approach Callista, and something in my chest tightened. A mother's instinct, maybe, or just the recognition that something significant was about to happen. Brody stopped right beside Callista, who was laughing at something Aunt Ruth had said about wedding night advice. He reached up and tugged on her designer dress. Callista looked down, slightly annoyed at the interruption. "What is it, Brody? The adults are talking." "I have a question," he said, his voice steady and clear. "Can it wait, sweetheart? We're discussing the wedding." "It's about Emma." The room didn't exactly go quiet, but there was a shift in attention. People turned toward the little boy who'd mentioned the dead girl everyone seemed to have forgotten. Brody looked up at Callista with those serious eyes. "Should I tell everyone what you did to Cousin Emma's medicine?" The champagne glass slipped from Callista's manicured fingers and shattered on the marble floor. The sound echoed through the funeral home like a bomb going off. Every conversation stopped. Every head turned. Preston stepped back from Callista like she'd suddenly become radioactive. Callista's face transformed from celebration to terror in an instant. Her perfectly applied makeup couldn't hide the way all the blood drained from her cheeks. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "What do you mean, sweetie?" she finally managed, her voice climbing an octave higher than normal. But Brody wasn't done. He had more to say, and everyone was listening now. Brody stood there in his little black suit, completely unaware that he was about to destroy everything. His innocent eyes looked up at Callista, waiting for an answer to his question. The entire funeral home had gone silent except for the sound of champagne dripping onto the marble floor from the shattered glass. "The white pills," Brody continued, his voice carrying through the room with devastating clarity. "When you visited last week, you went into Emma's room with her medicine bag. You took the pills out of the brown bottle and put different white ones in. You told me it was a grown-up game and I'd get in big trouble if I told anyone. But Emma's gone now, so the game is over, right?" Preston physically backed away from Callista, his face cycling through confusion, disbelief, and horror. "Callista, what is he talking about?" "He's confused," Callista said, her voice shaking. She reached for Brody's shoulder, but he stepped away. Children make up stories when they're grieving. I'm not making it up, Brody protested, his young voice indignant. You made me go watch TV in the living room. You said Emma needed special medicine and I couldn't watch. But I came back because I forgot my Nintendo Switch. I saw you putting the white pills in the brown bottle. You were throwing Emma's real pills in your purse. My knees buckled. Devin caught me before I hit the floor. The clinical trial medication, the brown bottle that held Emma's miracle drug, the medicine that had been saving her life. The room started spinning, but my mind became crystal clear for the first time since Emma died. The trial, I said, my voice barely a whisper that somehow everyone heard. Emma was getting better. She was going to be the success story. Nexus Pharmaceuticals was going to feature her in medical journals, at conferences. She was proof their drug worked. Callista's hands were trembling. You don't understand. This is ridiculous. I would never hurt Emma. Lancaster Pharmaceuticals, I continued, the pieces clicking together with horrible precision. You've been trying to get a job there for 2 years. They're Nexus's biggest competitor. Their drug failed trials last year. If Emma's medication succeeded, if she became the poster child for Nexus's treatment, Lancaster would lose the entire juvenile autoimmune market. That's what, $3 billion? You're grieving, Callista said desperately. You're not thinking clearly. Preston pulled out his phone. Show me your emails with Lancaster. What? Preston, you can't seriously believe this. Show me the emails, Callista. This is insane. But her hand went to her phone protectively. Uncle John, who'd been frozen in shock, suddenly moved. He grabbed Callista's phone from her hand before she could react. Password, he demanded. You have no right. Callista tried to grab it back, but Uncle John held it out of reach. It's Emma's birthday, I said quietly. She always used Emma's birthday for everything. Uncle John typed in the date. The phone unlocked. He scrolled for less than 30 seconds before his face went white. Dear God, you documented everything. He held up the phone, showing an email thread with Lancaster's CEO. The subject line read, Trial Neutralization Progress. The latest email, dated the day after Emma died, included a wire transfer confirmation for $500,000. My mother collapsed into a chair. You killed her? You killed that baby for money? It wasn't supposed to kill her, Callista screamed, her perfect composure finally shattering completely. The dosage I calculated should have just made her sick enough to fail out of the trial. It was supposed to discredit the medication, not kill her. I'm not a monster. You replaced her liver medication with acetaminophen. Dr. Hendrix's voice came from the back of the room. Nobody had noticed him arrive. He was holding papers, Emma's toxicology results. Concentrated acetaminophen. For a child with compromised liver function, that's a death sentence. You knew her medical history. You knew what that would do. Callista fell to her knees. I needed the money. The wedding, the lifestyle, Preston's family expecting things, and Lancaster promised me an executive position once the trial failed. It was just business. It wasn't personal. Not personal. I found my voice, found my rage. You held her when she was born. You taught her to ride a bike. You braided her hair for her school pictures. You sat at her bedside during treatments. You called her Emma Bear. And you murdered her for a job promotion and wedding money? Preston was already on the phone with 911. I need police at Hampton Funeral Home. Immediately. Callista looked around the room wildly, seeing nothing but horror and disgust on every face. Even Uncle John, who always had something philosophical to say, stood speechless. Her carefully constructed world had collapsed in minutes, brought down by an 8-year-old boy's simple honesty. The police arrived within 7 minutes, though it felt like hours. 2. Officers entered the funeral home and found Callista still on her knees, surrounded by family members who'd formed a circle around her, not to protect, but to prevent escape. She kept mumbling about dosage calculations and how it was supposed to be temporary. The officers read her rights while Emma's casket sat as a silent witness to her confession. I need to call my lawyer, Callista said as they handcuffed her. You need to rot in hell, my mother told her, the first time I'd ever heard her swear. The investigation that followed revealed the full scope of Callista's plan. She'd been in debt for over $100,000, living far beyond her means to keep up with Preston's wealthy family. Lancaster Pharmaceuticals had approached her 6 months ago when they learned she had inside access to the Nexus trial through Emma. The emails showed months of planning, discussions about neutralizing the competition, and detailed payment schedules tied to specific outcomes. The prosecutor explained it simply during the trial. Callista had replaced Emma's immunosuppressant medication with concentrated acetaminophen tablets she'd stolen from the hospital where she did sales calls. She knew Emma's liver was already compromised from years of medication. She knew exactly what would happen. The miscalculation was a lie she told herself to sleep at night. Preston testified against her. He revealed that 3 days before Emma died, Callista had taken out a life insurance policy on Emma without my knowledge, forging my signature. She'd listed herself as a beneficiary, claiming it was to help with medical expenses. The policy was worth $200,000. The jury deliberated for 2 hours. Guilty of murder in the first degree. The judge sentenced her to life without the possibility of parole. When they led her away, she looked at me one last time. "I loved her too," she said. I turned away. Love doesn't calculate dosages. Love doesn't forge signatures. Love doesn't kill for money. 6 months after the trial, I established the Emma Foundation with the life insurance money Callista never got to collect. We fund treatment for children with autoimmune diseases and provide financial support for families navigating clinical trials. Emma's butterfly paintings hang in the foundation office, bright spots of color and hope against white walls. Brody visits every Sunday. We paint butterflies together, and I teach him the techniques Emma discovered. He still asks sometimes if he did the right thing by telling the truth. "You saved other children," I tell him. "Lancaster Pharmaceuticals is under federal investigation. 3 more families came forward with suspicious deaths during competing drug trials. You're a hero, buddy." "I just missed Emma," he says simply, "and I didn't like keeping secrets." Dr. Hendricks helped me understand the medical evidence. The real trial drug had been working. Emma would have been fully recovered within 6 months. She would have been the success story that changed how we treat juvenile autoimmune diseases. Instead, she became the case that exposed pharmaceutical corruption and murder for profit. Uncle John doesn't make speeches about God's plan anymore. He sends a check to the foundation every month with a note, "For Emma's butterflies." My mother volunteers at the foundation, organizing fundraisers with the energy she once reserved for family gossip. Preston donated his entire settlement from breaking off the engagement to the foundation. He attached a note, "I'm sorry I didn't see who she really was." The foundation has helped 73 children access treatment in its first year. Each family receives a butterfly pin, designed from Emma's last painting, the one she didn't get to finish. I completed it myself, following the sketches she'd left behind. It's a monarch butterfly, wings spread wide, rising toward the sun. Yesterday, a mother called to thank us for saving her daughter's life. The foundation had covered her experimental treatment costs when insurance refused. "She's painting again," the mother said through tears. "She wants to be an artist, just like Emma." I visit Emma's grave every Thursday, the day she used to have art class. I bring fresh flowers and tell her about the children we're helping. Sometimes I find butterfly drawings left by classmates who still remember her. The headstone reads, "Emma Grace Morrison, artist, fighter, butterfly. Her light exposed the darkness and continues to shine." Evil sometimes wears familiar faces. It smiles at holiday dinners, brings birthday presents, holds your hand during tragedies it orchestrated. But truth, even from the smallest voices, has immense power. An 8-year-old boy's inability to keep a terrible secret saved countless other children from becoming victims of corporate greed and personal ambition. Emma always said butterflies were proof that beautiful things could come from darkness. She was right. Her death exposed a killer, brought down a pharmaceutical conspiracy, and created a foundation that saves lives. She became the butterfly she always painted, transforming something ugly into something beautiful, something temporary into something eternal. Thank you for watching this story. If it touched you, please like this video and share it with others who need to hear it. Your support helps these important stories reach more people. Please comment below with your thoughts and subscribe to our channel for more powerful true stories that remind us that justice and truth always find a way. Remember, sometimes the smallest voices speak the loudest truths.